Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. All right, so I guess we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Watson X and NeuralSeek webinar. My name is Jimmy Autran, and I'm a data and AI technical specialist here at IBM. And I also have two colleagues of mine, Jordan Burrows, who also works with me as a data and AI technical specialist. He'll be presenting on Watson X, our newest platform that is coming out in July 2023, so basically next month. And then we have the Vice President of AI, Garrett Rowe, who is with us, who will be talking about revolutionizing customer care with AI. Let me just go to the next slide. And okay, sorry, I'm having a bit of issues. So for this webinar, we're going to be presenting our upcoming Watson X platform that is releasing in July of 2023. And then we're going to be talking about transforming your customer care with NeuralSeek using generative AI. And then some of the practical use cases that we have for businesses of what you can do with one of these foundational models and how you can apply that into your business. Also, if you have Watson Assistant, we will be talking about how NeuralSeek will be able to use generative AI to build and update your Watson Assistant automatically by keeping up to date with your latest information on your business website. And we also have, we're going to be having a session for Q&A for if you have questions about Watson X or NeuralSeek. But feel free to type your questions in the chat in the meantime, and we'll get back to them as soon as we can. And at the end of our presentation of the Q&A, we're going to have a quiz, which is going to be a competition to win some IBM merchandise or NeuralSeek merchandise. So if you're interested in winning that, please make sure to pay attention because some of the content that is in this presentation will be on the quiz. Thank you. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jordan Burrows so that he can talk more about our latest Watson X platform that will be coming soon. I'll pass it over to you, Jordan.
Thanks, Jimmy. So good afternoon, everyone. Like Jimmy mentioned, my name is Jordan Burrows, and I'm also a technical specialist here at IBM. And so I'm very excited to have you all join our webinar today. And so I'm going to use the next few minutes to introduce the topics for our webinar, which is Watson X and NeuralSeek. And then, we'll hear from Garrett Rowe, where he'll show you how you can utilize NeuralSeek. So let's go ahead and get started. So over the last few months, and I'm pretty sure Jimmy and Garrett can probably attest to this as well. And so we've had several conversations with clients who've had like a really genuine interest in AI and what IBM is doing to separate itself in the AI industry. And so whether it's AI for customer care, where we've assisted several organizations with scaling up their support of their customers through conversational AI like Watson Assistant, or just internal deployment options where I've demonstrated how AI can support your workforce through human resources or logistics. And so webinars like these are some of my favorite type of events because today we're going to challenge you to evaluate where you are in your AI journey and show you how our new Watson X and NeuralSeek environments can help you meet your goals for your organization. So, whether you're just getting started in learning about AI for customer care, or you're already deploying a conversational AI platform, but now you're interested in training your virtual agent to recognize context within a conversation. This webinar is designed to show you how you can utilize our AI to potentially cut costs and run more efficiently, whether that be internally with your company or for customer-facing use cases. So let's start off with Watson X and foundation models. So this year has just been an exciting year for AI and IBM. And so all week, IBM has had events specifically highlighting Watson X and foundation models. And so for those who aren't familiar with foundation models are large-scale neural network algorithms that can be trained on unstructured data sets. So if you're looking at this slide here, you can see how your data, whether it be text, speech, or images, can be deployed through a foundation model to build platforms that you can utilize to support your organization. And so the purpose of foundation models are to recognize and adapt to new scenarios and use cases based on the large-scale data being provided. And so one of the most popular foundation models that I'd say most people are familiar with or have heard of recently is ChatGPT. And so ChatGPT is what we call generative AI, which is designed to extract like large amounts of data and generate answers or even complete tasks based on the data it's been trained on. And so what ChatGPT is great at doing is it's great at training itself on large amounts of data. But what we're learning or what we're starting to learn about ChatGPT is that regardless of how much data can be applied or data can be trained on, ChatGPT is just not prepared for large scale or enterprise-wide adoption. And it's just not designed for organizations at this point who are looking to comfortably rely on the platform to manage their customer-facing interactions. And so what this did was this created an opportunity for us at IBM where we've decided to leverage our relationships with companies similar to yourselves, along with leveraging our experience with Watson and AI to help you get the most out of deploying, AI for your organization. And so IBM has worked with 80% of the Fortune 500. And so we have experience with almost every business use case you can imagine. And so who better to help guide you to meeting your goals for AI than us? Next slide. So with that being said, we recently announced Watson X, which is our brand new data and AI platform. So if you're looking at the slide here, you can see Watson X consists of 3 platforms. And so the first is watsonx.ai. And so watsonx.ai is for training and deploying traditional machine learning models and foundation models, where the goal is really to accelerate the time it takes to train and validate your models. So I'd say a good example of this would be if you're already deploying a virtual assistant on your personal website or mobile application, like you can utilize watsonx.ai to generate an entire conversation for your virtual assistant. This way you're spending more time improving the content that you're sharing with your customers and having for those customer facing use cases. And so secondly, we have watsonx.data. And so watsonx.data is really our data repository that's designed for you to build models supported by some of the best data management systems that you can find. And then lastly, we also have watsonx.governance. And so when speaking of having like reliable data where we can build models without bias, watsonx.governance is designed to help you meet your goals for your data. And so each of these platforms works pretty much together when building foundation models. So from the time that you start preparing your data all the way through deploying the data, you'll be supported by Watson X. And so some of the features of Watson X also includes bringing your own data and AI models to Watson X and choosing from, or potentially just choosing from open source libraries to start. And our Watson products are designed for everyone. So whether you have several years of data science experience or you need a low code or no code environment, Watson X can be customized to your needs. And so another feature of Watson X is it also makes cloud adoption easier. And so as a technical specialist, we're not just interested in helping you build models, but we're also interested in making sure that you have a secure platform where you can manage your data. And so whether that be on-prem or in a hosted cloud environment, our goal is that you're using trustworthy AI like Watson X to help mitigate bias in your models and to make sure that you feel comfortable with your data. And so in addition to these 3 platforms that I talked about, we also recently announced our brand new Watson Code Assistant platform as well. And so in addition to have generative AI for building machine learning models, we also have generative AI for software development where Watson can help you write code. And so we've actually been working with our partners at Ansible to develop Watson Code Assistant, where in a recent demo of this environment, Code Assistant actually generated 60% of the code used to build out software for this demo platform that was used as an example. And so if you're someone who writes code often and you like to customize your models, Watson Code Assistant will be available for you pretty soon as well. And so I know I briefly touched on what we're doing with Watson X and Code Assistant. And so if you're interested in continuing a conversation surrounding these platforms, feel free to follow up with me after this webinar. I'd love to walk you through what IBM is doing with its other AI platforms, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all. And so Now that we've talked about what's new with IBM and what's new with AI and Watson X, I want to transition over to one of the focal points of this webinar, which is NeuralSeek. And so what we want to do is we want to show you how you can leverage NeuralSeek for potential customer facing use cases and or internal use cases, for your organization. And so today we actually have the developer of NeuralSeek, Garrett Rowe, who'll be demonstrating the tool. And so, Garrett, if you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Awesome, thanks. Let me share my screen and we'll dive into a demo here. And so feel free to, as I'm going through, put any questions you have into the chat, and I'll aim to address some of the questions as I go through, or we'll capture them at the end, right? So with the demo, I'm going to kind of start at the end of it. So how does this look for an organization, right? And so as part of the demo, I've got a big repository of IBM information, right? So in-depth technical articles about OpenShift, about some of the IBM platforms and products, hands-on how to troubleshooting documents, the typical things that you'd find for a software company that's doing business online, right? And so as you put those things together, for a company the size of IBM, you're talking hundreds of thousands to millions of documents, right? And for even a smaller company, you're well into the hundreds of thousands of pages of documents when you start to think of all of the different versions of the different software products, the iterations that go into it, and defining the nuance between all of those, right? So scale here becomes wildly important, right? And there's a lot of misinformation going on right now and a lot of tech hype about vector embeddings and brand new databases to solve very old problems. And when it comes down to it, this has always been the case for these things. New technology like large language models comes out, a world of new innovation comes around it. People tend to try to resolve the same problems that have been solved multiple times before. And then over the coming years, those things sort themselves out. And more often than not, the tried and true methods, the things that have been proven at scale end up being the things that are enhanced to actually solve the core problems. Learning from a lot of the new technology, right? But basing the solutions on things that are proven in industry. So when it comes down to it, NeuralSeek is, it's not a large language model. It's an accelerator for using proven, solid enterprise technology to solve topical business problems with more modern approaches, right? So what we do is we bundle together a no-code connector to enterprise large language models, including Watson X, which I'm going to show you today. We tie back into corporate knowledge that's either stored in Watson Discovery or Elasticsearch or other Lucene-based search indexes. And this is important, right? Because at the end of the day, Lucene is a large and proven technology, right? That's been around for 20 plus years, delivers sub-second response, and can give us the scaling that we need to get up to hundreds of thousands of documents at sub-second response time to make these virtual agents interactive in a real-time manner. We do borrow a lot from some of the new technologies around vector embedding, cosine similarity, semantic search, and semantic scoring, because those things are important. But when viewed alone, they're not enough to handle the scale at the time complexity and cost we need to do this at the enterprise level. And I'll get into that a little bit, right? Because when it comes down to it, creating a chatbot that just interacts with somebody and then creating an interactive virtual assistant to handle actual questions from customers are two wildly different things, right? Because just because something is similar doesn't necessarily mean it's the right answer from a corporate perspective. Now, when I come in and I ask this whole system here, which is based on Watson Assistant, Watson X, and NeuralSeek, how do I do a very specific question here? What's the namespace, or how do I adjust the namespace parameter of an ODF file, right? I'm meaning something very specific towards a particular version of OCP. how do I do it, and where do I find that information? So I can quickly get that. I've linked it back here to a help article. So this answer was generated dynamically by Watson X with the help of NeuralSeek stitching that context together that came from our large repository of data about these topic areas. So behind the scenes, I probably have 50,000 documents in here that we searched through, categorized, ranked, and then built this answer from dynamically. And we could definitely click out here, get to the help article that we found the answer from, and it's all stitched together. What if I ask a more pointed question? Like, when do OCP 311 clusters go out of support, right? So something that I'm caring specifically about one version of this product, 311, right? And when does that happen? I need to know about this one thing. So we can get a topical answer here back almost instantaneously. Again, generated by Watson X with the help of the backing repository and all stitched together by NeuralSeek. So when you start talking about other things, right, this is where the slippery slope comes of the difference between what we provide and what you can get by, hey, just let me slap together, Llama plus GPT plus LangChain, and I've got this magical wonder of vector similarity, and I'm going to answer all these questions. A lot of that starts to break down when you have extreme specificity of query, right? So I cared about OCP 311. I don't care about other versions at all. Other ways where you can quickly break stacks like that, or if I search by a phone number or a specific product ID, or things that have very little similarity to other things, or lots of similarity, but I care only about the one thing. That's where enterprise systems need to be specific and flexible and adaptable. The other things come in is as you start to stitch all of these pieces together and you're basing large language model embeddings along with large language model answers, the window for getting hallucinations up through the system becomes very large, right? So if you're basing all of your different decision points on large language models across all these different large language models, your window for attack for getting hallucination is quite wide. So we need to be able to control that from a business perspective. So I'm going to come in here with something that you would probably cause a hallucination, right? I'm going to say, how do I sign up for IBM Music Plus for free? And hopefully we're going to be able to squash this one and not say, hey, I'm going to make something up. And yeah, boom, we got it, right? Because we're able to track that back to the source repository, understand, even though inside of my source repository, I've got lots of things that talk about music, right? So IBM sponsors the Grammys. So my knowledge base is polluted with things that talk about music and probably the word plus and definitely lots of things about IBM. But because I know the semantic breakdown of that sentence, I talked about IBM Music Plus for free. I know that even if I have all of those words that came back from the knowledge base, the knowledge base says, hey, we've got great content on this. Because of the answer I stitched, yeah, that's not something I know because of the similarity score, right? So let's dive into the back end of the platform and take a look at all this. Move this out of the way, and we're going to dive into NeuralSeek. So right off the bat, NeuralSeek helps me understand my data, right? So if you ask me, what does NeuralSeek do? NeuralSeek is a content analysis platform, right? It helps you tie back questions that people have to the actual answers that are being produced and tell you where you've got good answers and where you have crappy documentation. So I can come in here real quick and see, okay, here are some of the questions that I asked in the last one about OCP. And I can see, okay, I'm hovering around 60%. I had made some changes earlier. I actually decreased the accuracy of this one for the demo. I pulled out some documentation from the repository to make this one a little bit lower, just for show. You can see the namespace of the ODF, again, hovering pretty high. I had asked a few questions here randomly about CP4D. They weren't inside the repository they had pulled down. So you can see, yeah, I've got very low coverage. And what this does for me as a knowledge management person, it highlights, hey, this is where I need to bring additional information in to actually answer questions for, right? So I can quickly go in and say, okay, what did the person ask? So what did CP for D? I don't have any documentation in the store that really matches or answers that question. And I can get that just by highlighting down here inside of this list, seeing where I'm in the red and saying, hey, this is where my team needs to create some more pieces. Likewise, coverage is an important metric for all of this, meaning how many documents do I have that the knowledge base itself came back with and said, hey, here's a potential solution to this, but I'm not guaranteeing this thing is right. It's a highlight metric for two things. Number one, when I have, like in this case, a very high confidence and a very low coverage, it typically means that I've got one or two documents that are exceptionally good at answering the question at hand. Versus when I have things like this, very high coverage and very low confidence, it probably means one of two things. Either I have lots of documents that sort of talk around the solution, but don't talk to the question at hand, or even more nefarious, I've got lots of documents that say completely different things for the answer. And this is oftentimes something that we highlight for customers that we go in of, hey, they've got 14 documents. The policy, maybe an HR policy has changed over the years, but they have all of those old policy documents still in their repository. So when I try to answer the one question, the model is telling me, hey, there's a lot of confusion here. You say to do it one way, this other document says the exact opposite thing. We highlight that very quickly here by the combination of high coverage and low confidence. Let's look at actually how this works, right? So as I'm going through and, as my analytics are building here, I have a look back window of exactly what did people ask and when, right? How are those things built? What are the most common and frequent questions that are coming through? So that I can actually look back in, find the question that somebody asked, like maybe I'll take this one, and let's go do a actual search of this and find where in the documentation these things came from. And we can do an answer provenance. So show me exactly where that Watson X model sourced this information from. And then boom, this is the document that it pulled it from. Here's the source link. And I can train relevancy down into the data source directly from here. Now, we're saying we think this is 100%. I may come in and say, yeah, I don't like it though so much. So I can just drag the bar back down, train the relevancy of the underlying data source. And over time, as I continue these trainings, we'll restack and be able to tune the entire system to answer better based on that training. This is the right document, so I want it up high. Likewise, we can actually train the large language model itself. So I could come in here to the actual answer, click on edit and say, yeah, I want to get rid of this end part that isn't quite right. I'm going to save this now. Now that edited answer will be used by Watson X to then train all future language generations in this area. So I can quickly adapt the model to answering questions in the style and content that I like. Now, the setup of this is super easy. All I do is I come in and right when I start, there's a walk me that gets me started. Connect out to your data, connect to the large language model. In this case, I'm using Watson X with the FLAN T5 model. I could just as easily switch over to FLAN UL2. It's that simple. All I do is I drop in the API key that I got from Watson X. And inside of Watson X, that again is super easy. My API key here just lives right on the home page. So after I've gone in, played with the models, identify which one I want, and potentially tune the model specifically for my customer base, I can grab the key and the model ID, come back out to NeuralSeek and drop it in, and then I'm done. It's all no code. So when I start to look at how all of this snaps together, right? The entire point of this is to reduce the operational cost of these virtual agents. So as I'm using this to answer fallback questions and gain insights to my data, I can be automatically building virtual agents with this, right? So I've got these great quality questions. I might want to come in and select a few of these that I want to bring into a virtual agent that's brand new. So I can take that, I can say, okay, I want to export this directly into Watson Assistant. And I can export it into dialogues or actions, either side of the Watson Assistant platform. Right now I have dialogue selected. if I wanted to come in and change that, right, I could come into the platform preferences and say, hey, I want to build to actions. I'm going to go ahead and save that. On the Curate tab, I'll then select the pieces that I want and build directly into actions. That'll give me a load file, which then I can take directly into Watson Assistant, click on the upload button and land it in. And then at this point, once I hit save, all of my actions, all of my build, all of the training data around this are automatically brought into Watson Assistant. So I've got my answers, I've got all of my training data for the intent, the multiple answers. I've just saved myself an hour of work maybe for going through all of this at the minimum. And then the efficiency comes with the copy and repeat, right? So I can take individual agents across different departments, different sections of my business, and empower business users to do this really, really quickly. They don't need to know anything deep about the technology. It is just point, click, and go. So at this point, once I have these pieces in, right, so I can wait for the system to train. Let me take a sample question here. At this point, this is a trained virtual agent. I'll get those answers back that were generated by the large language model. Because they're curated, they come back sub-second at this point. Now with this, now NeuralSeek will look over time and tell me, hey, monitor my source data. Because one of the biggest issues as you're building virtual agents is the scope, group, and scale of them, right? So I've got a virtual agent here with 3 Q&A pairs that are pretty technical, right? What happens when I get 100 Q&A? How about 150? They quickly become a very hard thing to maintain. I've got all of this information here that is quite technical, quite deep, and probably very version specific. Do I want to spend the time looking through every single answer here for something that's out of date? Probably no, because that's a big time suck. And it's one of the things that I see a lot in the industry when people actually go to implement a virtual agent and then come to the realization after 3 or 4 months of like, oh, now I'm giving wrong answers, right? How do we solve that problem without saying, okay, take all of that money that you saved in implementing the virtual agent and now spend it on periodically looking through things to update it? Well, NeuralSeek goes through and we keep a hash of the source. So as questions flow into NeuralSeek, we automatically monitor to say, hey, this question is being used live inside of an agent. I need to know when the source documentation changes. We create that link between those things. We keep a source hash of the content that was used to form the answer. And then over time, if that source changes, we'll alert up through the system and say, hey, we know you have a pocket of data that's up in that virtual agent that is now probably out of date because the source documentation changed. We'll alert you to that and we'll say, hey, do you want me to go update that for you automatically? So we can greatly chop down the time it takes to maintain these virtual agents. So I know we want to spend more time here on Q&A and then get into our trivia. So I'm going to break here for a second. Are there any questions that people had that I need to talk to? Things that we want to discuss before we dive into the trivia?
Garrett, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So for everyone, feel free to send your questions. If you have questions, feel free to send them through the chat, or if you're able to come off mute, feel free to come off and
I thought I saw a few on my side running into the chat. I saw a bunch of things pop up.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Jimmy, are you seeing anything in the chat, like any questions about NeuralSeek or Watson X so far?
So far, oh well, we have a question in the chat from Mark saying, how is it priced?
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely. In general, all of these solutions are priced by the amount of information flowing through. So the interaction, so of course, Watson is priced based on monthly active user. NeuralSeek is priced based on question that flows through with discounting for the more questions that you have. So as more questions flow through, the cost per answer goes down dramatically. And typically what we see with implementations around this is that you'll have a larger cost during the initial build and prove out. Also, we do answer caching. So it's part of NeuralSeek will allow you to come in and specify an answer cache. And what this does is allows you to um, not have to go down to language generation for every turn. So once I have the knowledge base queried and I've got that cached, and I have a few language generations that have been run, with 3 or 4 different variations of answers, usually for most companies, that's enough variation that they want. And so at that point, NeuralSeek can automatically start giving cached answers without having to curate up into Watson Assistant. It speeds up and it saves cost. So a lot of features here are aimed again at providing this at a low cost at enterprise scale. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. And Garrett, will you be sharing the demo? I'm assuming it's the recording. Yeah, this session is being recorded, so we will send it. If you are interested in seeing the recording, we can send it to you. Just feel free to email me, and we'll have our contact. You can either contact Garrett or Jordan or me, and we'll send you the recording.
So, and so we also have another question from Justin. And so he has a question about OCR. And so his question is, could it use OCR on an image repository to help structure the data? So his examples are like identifying client names, policy numbers, coverages.
Yes. So definitely for those things, we leverage the underlying knowledge base. So Watson Discovery, which we have connected into here, it can absolutely automatically OCR pieces like that, bring them in, extract the text, and bring them up all the way through the engine to answer questions with. Now, one of the fun use cases that we have that actually we've implemented in production for several customers now is using video to actually power a knowledge engine, right? So pretty fun use case. We have one customer that is a global organization that focuses on trade, right? So things like if you want to be a crane operator, if you are a stonemason, right? They're the organization that helps certify and provide training as career progression for all of these different physical labor trades. Now, they have an internal repository of lots and lots of videos, right? So think of like when you go to YouTube to say, how do I change the battery in my car? And somebody walks you through it. Except they have certified professionals that create these videos as training. So we take from them all of that video content. We use Watson components to extract all of the text from that, then take that into this stack and turn those videos into queryable objects. So instead of having to watch through the 5-minute video, you can ask a pointed question of like, what is the ideal run for a staircase, right? What's the ideal stair height? In-depth technical questions, and then get specific answers back in the voices of the experts. So a pretty fun use case that is very easy with this stack.
Awesome. And we have one more question. It's they're curious if you can elaborate, Garrett, on the prompt engineering future of NeuralSeek versus Watson X, if you could answer that question.
Yeah, yeah. So prompt engineering actually does push down into Watson X, right? So one of NeuralSeek's features is that we pull and bucket for you, right? So a user question comes into NeuralSeek. One of the first things that we do is what's called a query expansion. So we get rid of trivial words, we do a query expansion on that, and we push down into the knowledge base to get back a corpus of data. Now, from that, we get lots and lots of data, right? So the next thing that we do post the knowledge base is compress that documentation down into what we think is the most topical portions of that, right? We do an internal rank, we do a compression, we remove duplicate sentences, extraneous pieces, and try to fit down into the maximum content window for the large language model that we're targeting, right? So typically today for a Watson X model, that's a context window of about 2,000 tokens maximum, right? And a token is 3 to 4 letters on average, right? So you can kind of do the math of the window. Now, a context window includes both all of the prompting, all of the context that we provide behind the scenes, plus the amount of answer that we want back. So it's a pretty limited window when it comes down to it. So it's incredibly important to get the right snippet of document into that thing so that you have the highest probability of getting a reasonable answer back out. And so that's, again, one of the biggest focuses of NeuralSeek is enable multi-turn conversation by remembering previous context. So that when I go down into the model, I can say, hey, I know I was talking about OCP in the last question. I know I need to pull OCP documents again for this next question if I do things like leave a dangling modifier, a determiner in the sentence that's unmatched. So tell me more about it. It at the end of the sentence probably means a reference back to the previous document, right? OCP, so that NeuralSeek knows, even though I didn't mention OCP, I still need to grab it from the underlying repository, bring it back in, rank it, score it, and compress it so I can send it out to the large language model. That's all handled by NeuralSeek, right? So as I do those things and allow for that prompt to be built, right? So essentially, NeuralSeek is creating a very complicated, very long prompt to say, here is what I want you to do, large language model. We allow the ability to inject into that prompt custom things, right? So you could take a customization of our prompt and say, I want you to answer in a cowboy accent, if that's what you wanted to do. Usually for business, though, what you want to say, hey, I need every answer to be in numbered list format, right? That's a common one that we do. Or answer as if you were the Nordstrom's customer service desk, right? That's the voice that I want of this thing. So we allow you to inject that specific piece usually into the end of the prompt that allows you to fine tune exactly what's going to come out of that large language model. Now, large language models are very finicky beasts, right? So for a lot of these things, the accuracy and the ability to respond to a specific prompt tuning comes down to the language model used. Hopefully that long-winded answer answers your question.
Yep, and then we have one more question from Chris, and so he wants to know if you can go deeper into how NeuralSeek handles the PII.
Yeah. So we've got a automatic PII detection algorithm inside of NeuralSeek. And so as a user question comes into NeuralSeek, we'll do an identification on the user input text to see if we can match any PII to it with our out-of-the-box model. Now, we allow you to extend that out-of-the-box model by giving example statements that either contain or don't contain PII, and then you tell us what PII you care about in that. So you can extend the model to even find things that are not necessarily PII, but they're pieces that you want to flag and potentially block from answers. One thing might be M&A situations where you don't want to log inside of the agent the name of the company that's the target, things like that. So it's pretty flexible in being able to adapt to PII. And then with that, you can flag the answer, mask the PII, hide the entire question and answer pair, or delete it immediately from the backing store.
Okay. Are there... Okay, so we have another question from Naresh. So with the introduction of watsonx.ai, how does that change NeuralSeek, or are there any changes?
That's really the magic of NeuralSeek is that we are LLM agnostic, right? So we can handle really any LLMs. We provide the no-code interface for it. So it's as simple as picking from the drop-down list and dropping in your API key. You'll select the LLM that fits your use case, right? So there's going to be trade-offs to all LLMs. Some are going to be very powerful, very slow, and very expensive. That's a GPT-4, right? So GPT-4, wildly pricey. Answers come back in 30 to 45 seconds, making it pretty unusable for most chatbot interactions, right? Then you have like a Watson X Flan T5, which is pretty fast, right? But limited in language selection, right? English only, right, for that one. So you just weigh what you're going to be doing with it, what your use case is. Are you internal? Are you external? What's your risk profile? And you'll select the LLM that fits best. We do all the no code, right? So we engineer the prompts for all of these things. We test, we tune, we take the effort out of it for business, and we do all the connection. If you were to come into the Watson X AI prompt lab, right, you could spend time doing custom tuning. As Watson X allows you to do that and then save a custom tune, we will allow you to bring that custom tune into NeuralSeek. So NeuralSeek has to do less work, and we're even more customized towards the specific model in Watson X you care about.